This commitment to freedom is inscribed in our nation's founding documents. The first of those documents, the Declaration of Independence, is right here in Utah, in the state capitol, and will be available for viewing throughout the games. The Declaration is here thanks to a program created by Norman Lear. Norman and I don't always agree on politics, but we agree that the Declaration of Independence is fundamental to our nation. And I want to thank Norman Lear for his vision of providing this document for not only the people of the world to see, but for our fellow Americans to review when they come to these great games. I hope people do come and read the document, because they'll understand why we're so insistent upon defending our values.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I sat here listening to these amazing people, to Van Jones with Margaret Carter, and to that glorious introduction, and to the Honorable Jan Schakowsky, presented by William McNary, and then my friend Bill. And I listened to all those words, and I thought, and those performances, those speeches, the heartfelt renditions of them, and I thought, my greatest hero, I don't know who he was or she, but somewhere in history somebody said, I wouldn't give that spot to a leopard. Following these people. I thank you, Bill. I thank you for being here, for that wonderful introduction. I thank you and Judith for your friendship, our friendship with Lynn. And I thank everything you do for all of us. I don't know of a more significant contribution to our culture and to our political and social life than Bill Moyer's Journal, Friday nights on PBS. And thank you, Bob Borisage and Roger Hickey and all of the caring people I always wanted to be like when I grew up. I am honored to be with you. If only my mother, somebody mentioned their mother earlier, if only my mother had been here to hear all these speeches and this introduction and my moment in this evening. Nothing as great as this evening could happen to me ever without my immediately thinking of my mother. To the extent that I'd hope to retain some humility and not get carried away by all of this, I always think of her. I called her a number of years ago to tell her, it was a Sunday morning, I called her to tell her that I had just gotten a phone call and learned something that was to be a secret for a little bit, that the Television Academy was going to start a Television Hall of Fame. And Mom, I had to say to her, guess who the first inductees are going to be? They're going to be David Sarnoff, who invented NBC, and William Paley, CBS, and Edward R. Murrow, one of the brilliant writers of all time, Paddy Chayefsky, Lucille Ball, Milton Berle, and me. And my mother said, listen, if that's what they want to do, who am I to say? Your flyer for Take Back America Conference listed 5 themes for the 2008 conference: economic strategy, green jobs, healthcare, Iraq, and a new social justice agenda. These things are described as at the heart of the progressive agenda. and each is urgent, but I'd like to suggest a sixth. Can we progressives, who won't be caught dead these days calling ourselves liberals, can we stop serving as a punching bag for the right? And speak with depth and conviction about the things that really matter to us. Once and for all, can we break through the false and humiliating charade that they alone are the arbiters of family values, morality, patriotism, the flag, the life of the spirit, God talk, and that they alone have the credibility to speak to these subjects and concerns. Gotta hand it to them. 60 years or so ago, they became alarmed at us. We were the new dealers. We were the advocates of the Great Society. And our social and political reforms were wreaking havoc on their idea of America. They're losing the country they envisioned to the likes of us, with our left-wing, labor-loving, business-regulating, bleeding-heart programs and policies. And finally, a relatively narrow band of wealthy far-right zealots resolved to put an end to it. Along the way, they made an interesting discovery. They found that the interests of the political neoconservatives and religious fundamentalists, the Christian right, could be joined together to serve the interests of corporate America, as Bill was talking about, which soon morphed into the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower cautioned us about. The neocons, theocons, and big business in bed together, a threesome to end all threesomes. But they were angry, they were fervent, they had big money, and they were determined to save America's soul, or at least gain power for themselves by taking America back from the progressives to the America they wanted. These were the three horses that Ronald Reagan, the great communicator, rode in on. And I submit, with Karl Rove picking up the reins, they were also the lead horses that those cowboys, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, rode in on. Shortly thereafter, as if to certify that connection, George Bush famously declared, "I believe that God wanted me to be president." In 1979, concerned with the beginning of what became the religious right and the moral majority, now focused on the family and other groups, I watched with growing concern the proliferation of TV evangelical ministries mixing politics and religion so recklessly. And I produced a 60-second public service announcement, a kind of a video op-ed. It featured a blue-collar worker sitting on a piece of factory equipment and telling us that since his wife and he disagreed about things politically all the time, and his kids too, and they were all good Christians, there had to be something wrong when TV preachers came along saying that you were a good Christian or a bad Christian, depending on your political point of view. That's not the American way, he concluded. A station or two here in D.C. played it on the evening news, among others, and NBC, among others, picked it up. Tom Brokaw, this will tell you how times have changed. Tom Brokaw devoted 7 minutes to the ad and a conversation with me. And like an act of spontaneous combustion, People for the American Way was born. Thank you. Now in its 26th year, People for the American Way is headed by our terrific new president, Catherine Colbert. It is a rare moment or a rare morning that I don't wake up, read my newspaper, and thank God that People for the American Way is there. People for, in its early years, called on the fairness doctrine to demand equal time of TV stations when only one side of a political question was presented. Forced to surrender the time, the stations then pressured the TV ministries to stop the practice of talking politics in a religious context. The preachers, of course, were pissed, though they would never describe it that way. I have a letter from Pat Robertson telling me that my arms were too short to box with God, and that God would take his side in any fight with me. Jerry Falwell called me the biggest enemy of the American family in our generation, which it troubles me to recall brought me serious death threats. I used the word God a moment ago, and I intend to use it often tomorrow in my plenary speech. Although I think the very personal elements of our religion are private matters, the search for meaning that defines us as humans is the greatest conversation going, and I want in. Religion, as the sociologist Robert Bellah has written, has played a crucial role in the development of American institutions, and there is a religious dimension to the whole fabric of American life, including the political sphere. It is the best, as I said, the best conversation going, and I want in. I also want to talk about patriotism. I love my country. I consider myself a patriot. And I do that, that's fine, thank you. I think that of all of you. And I do that despite the fact that I don't wear a flag lapel pin, and I'm often in disagreement with the policies of my government, including my Democratic representatives in the Congress. The title of my talk here tonight, and why tomorrow is important to me, is Why I Am a Born-Again American. I chose that title because I am talking about God and country. I chose it too because in the context of preparing these remarks, I felt deeply the need to be a born-again American. I realized also that this was not my first born-again American experience. In 1981, when People for the American Way was in its first year, I was watching a TV preacher and heard something that all but made my heart stop. I believe it was Jimmy Swaggart urging his audience to pray for the removal, in quotes, of a Supreme Court justice whom he found particularly offensive. Removal of a lifetime appointee as Supreme Court justice? If I live to be 1,000, and I aspire to that, I could not find the words to describe how this disturbed every fiber of my American being. A few days later, our company was having an executive retreat in San Diego. I walked into a room with a dozen or so senior executives. We had about 7 shows on the air, a few of them in the top 10 at that time. And I can still see the faces of those partners and associates I loved so much and to whom I owed so much as they waited in anticipation. And I related what I had seen and that had alarmed me so. And I said I needed to step down as president of production, or whatever my title was at the time. I was going to devote myself full-time to touring the country, raising awareness and financial support for People for the American Way, to fight this spewing of religious hatred and the serious assault on our most basic American values. I reflect on my reaction to that moment, and born again as an American is the best way I have found to describe it. And then I wonder if I'm taking myself too seriously. But it occurred to me that I can't be, because I have seen so much of that in so many, and so many of you here, so much of that reflexive need to do what you have to do because this country requires it of you, because you feel it. And in a sense, if you feel that, you can be born again an American every day you wake up to look at as your America, to work for your America. But anyway, it was something I had to do, and something I could afford to do. Something I could afford to do. And that brings me to the subject of gratitude, with which I'd like to close these remarks. I was walking once through the woods in Vermont many years ago with a great friend and noted religious historian. We were talking about things spiritual, as we are now, and I found myself asking him what was the shortest definition he could give me of worship. One word, he said: gratitude. And so I want to close tonight with the deepest of gratitude for the award you presented to me tonight, for the pride and privilege to have Bill Moyers present it to me. Gratitude for the beloved members of my family that could be here tonight and for those who couldn't. Gratitude for all the things, for all the bounty, for all the goodness in this world for which none of we extraordinary, accomplished, talented people in this room are responsible. That we are alive at this moment, born when we were and with the instincts and interests that draw us together tonight, sitting here in this state of grace, blessed with so much that none of us can take credit for. And so we address this expression of gratitude to God, to the Creator, to the Almighty, to the universe, to the fates, to great good fortune, to whatever word or image fills each of our heads when we say thank you. Thank you, thank you. And thank you. You cannot imagine how I have to pee.